Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. I see many of you are coming into the webinar, so I'm just going to give you a moment to get in, and then we'll get started on our presentation today. Thank you for joining us. All right. Yep, I see more of you coming in. Great. Okay, well, just to be respectful of your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I do see a few more filtering in, but we'll start with introduction so they won't miss much if they're just coming in. So welcome to our presentation on how to write great learning goals and outcomes. We are excited to be here today and share our knowledge with you. First, just some introduction. I am going to introduce Cassie Rice. We do have her on the line. You don't see her right now, but she may make an appearance at the end if we have some questions to answer. She will be monitoring the chat and question box as we go along. I am Desiree Moore. I'm the Director of Marketing and Strategic Growth here at Peregrine Global Services. Prior to coming to Peregrine, I actually worked in higher education for a number of years as an administrator and a faculty member. I have a passion for education, educating others, as well as just talking about education in general. So I'm excited to be here and to be your thought partner. And Laura.
Thank you. I'm Laura Miller. I'm the Senior Client Services Manager for Peregrine. I've been with Peregrine about 3.5 years. I work directly with our clients to make sure that their needs are met and to come up with solutions for the problems that you're facing. I'm excited to be here today.
So to participate in this webinar, we have a couple different ways. We're going to have polls throughout the webinar, so if you would just kindly respond to those when they come up. Also, you will notice that you have a question, you have your go-to webinar panel, and you can ask questions within that panel or make a comment, and we will provide time at the end of the webinar to answer all questions. So if just hold on till the end if you have a question and we'll answer it. If for some reason we run out of time, don't worry, we will reach out to you via email with a written response to your question. So we're going to start by just talking about what are learning outcomes and goals. And really quick, before I get started, I just would like to run a poll about your familiarity with learning outcomes. And so I'm going to ask you to rate your familiarity, and that includes, you could say I'm an expert, I have moderate knowledge, I have limited knowledge, or I'm new to the topic. And I'm going to launch that poll now. And so you should be able to see it now. And so go ahead and start answering. Okay, a lot of you have moderate knowledge or limited knowledge. So I think you're in the right place. And we have some experts. That's exciting. So if you have any value to add, please feel free to put it in the question box. Okay, we have a couple more people voting. So we have about 87% of you who have voted. Great. Thank you all so much. 89%. Okay, just give it one more moment in case we can get past that 90% threshold. Oh, we did, 91%. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this and then share the results here. All right, so as you can see, the majority of our audience shows that they have moderate knowledge, and then some of you have limited knowledge, but none of you are new to the topic. So that is good. And then we have an expert. So again, please feel free to share information with us if you think there's anything of value to the audience, and we would definitely be willing to share that. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that poll and move on to the next slide. Okay, so first we're going to cover learning goals. And what are learning goals? Learning goals are the product of faculty reflection on the skills, attitudes, and knowledge they expect students to learn as a result of matriculating through their institution's program. They are the roadmap for the curriculum and are the foundation on which their assessment program is built. However, learning goals are broad and are not specific or observable enough to be measured. let's look at some examples of learning goals. So if this was a healthcare administration program, which I think we have some healthcare administration programs on the line right now, these would be some examples. So the first one would probably be used in an undergraduate program, and that goal is to understand healthcare delivery systems. Now that's pretty broad, right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into a healthcare delivery system, and so they're very complex, and so that wouldn't necessarily be something that you could easily measure. The next one you might see within a graduate program, so or potentially an undergraduate, just depending on the program of study, but to acquire and practice leadership and managerial skills that will positively affect performance as a healthcare manager. And again, this one is quite broad and really hard to measure, but these are important because they're the foundation of learning outcomes. Now, learning outcomes are very different from learning goals. As I discussed, learning goals are broad, lack specificity, cannot be easily observed, and are difficult to measure. Um, However, learning goals are important, right? Because they act as that foundation. Um, and so with your learning goals, when you write those, you need to specify what students will be or have as a result of completing the program. So next we're going to move into learning outcomes. Okay, so we understand what learning goals are and we're going to move into learning outcomes, but I just have to provide some context on Bloom's taxonomy because that's really the foundation for writing learning outcomes. So learning goals are the foundation for building your outcomes, but of course, this is the foundation for just writing the outcomes. So in 1956, Benjamin Bloom, along with a group of like-minded educators, developed a framework for classifying educational goals and objectives into a hierarchical, which I struggle to say that word, so I apologize, structure representing different forms and levels of learning. This framework consisted of the following three domains: the cognitive domain, encompassing intellectual or thinking skills; the affective domain, encompassing attitudes and values; and the psychomotor domain, encompassing physical skills or performance of actions. Each of these three domains consisted of a multi-tiered structure for classifying learning according to increasing levels of complexity. In this framework, each level of learning is a prerequisite for the next level. So in higher education, the cognitive domain has been the principal focus for developing educational goals and objectives. Bloom's taxonomy has stood the test of time and has been used by generations of curriculum planners and college and university professors, and has become the standard for developing frameworks of learning, teaching, and assessment. Bloom's original 1956 taxonomy of educational objectives identify the following levels of cognitive learning, and these are ranged from lower order to higher order levels of learning, and they include knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Now, if you have limited or moderate knowledge of this, you may say, okay, Bloom's taxonomy is familiar to me, but this these levels are not, right? I've heard of them differently. And that is because in 2001, a former student of Bloom's, Lauren Anderson, and a group of cognitive psychologists, curriculum theorists, and instructional researchers and testing and assessment specialists published a revision of Bloom's taxonomy. The revision updates the taxonomy for the 21st century and includes significant changes in terminology and structure. In the revised framework, action words, or verbs, are used instead of nouns to replace the 6 cognitive levels, as you can see here. You can see that the 3 of the cognitive levels were completely renamed, and the top 2 higher order cognitive levels are interchanged. The result is a more dynamic model for classifying intellectual processes used by learners in acquiring and using knowledge. All right, so the revised taxonomy identifies the following new levels of cognitive learning, right? So lower to higher order levels of learning. And what we have is we have remembering at the bottom, and that is retrieving, recognizing, and recalling relevant information, knowledge from long-term memory. Understanding, which is constructing meaning from oral, written, and graphic messages through interpreting, classifying, summarizing, and so on. Then you have, oops, sorry about that. Then you have applying, using information in new ways, carrying out or using a procedure or process through execution or implementation. analyzing, breaking material into constituent parts, understanding overall structure or purpose through differentiation, organization, and attributing those differences, evaluating, making judgments based on criteria and standards, and then creating, putting elements together to form a coherent or functional work, reorganizing elements into a new pattern or structure through generating, planning, or producing. So we understand the different levels of learning, right? So knowledge is at the bottom and we have creating at the top, and each level of learning builds upon itself. So you have to master knowledge in order to move on to understanding and so on, right? So in the original and current version of the taxonomy, we can identify a list of suitable verbs for describing the cognitive levels in writing objectives, right? So for each cognitive level in the revised taxonomy, the following table provides a list of sample verbs to use in writing intended for student learning outcomes that are appropriate for each cognitive level of learning. In the table, the learning levels are ranged from lower order learning to higher order learning. You will see here that verbs such as lists or verbs such as list or recognized are used for the lowest level, which is remembering. And then verbs used such as describe or discuss are used for to describe understanding, the next level of learning. And then verbs such as utilize or classify are used for the next level, applying. I should mention that each academic program, the lower levels of verbs are often used for undergraduate programs, and as a person progresses through their education, the majority of verbs used for the development of learning outcomes belong to those higher levels, such as evaluating and creating. And the verbs that signify the level of learning are the first and most crucial step to developing your learning outcomes. However, when choosing the verbs, it is important to consider how well you will be able to measure that particular outcome. If you take a look at this table right here, we see some verbs organized by very hard, still hard, and relatively easy to measure. For example, it may be really difficult to measure whether a learner appreciates something or has confidence in a subject. You are more likely to be able to measure their ability to identify or understand with a knowledge-based assessment, which is quite common for understanding that level of learning. But it's easiest to measure a student's ability to demonstrate or explain because you can see it. It's easier to test. And so when you're choosing your verbs, ensure that your verbs make it so that you can measure your learning outcome. And now that we understand Bloom's taxonomy and how to use verbs to signify the learning level, it's time to focus on actually writing our learning outcomes. So another poll. This poll, I am asking you, does your academic program have learning outcomes for the core or fundamental subjects, workplace soft skills, both? Or you can answer, we currently do not have any learning outcomes in place. And so I'm going to launch that poll right now and give you just a moment to answer. So if you could just get on and let us know. All right, we have both. The majority of you have both. Your core fundamental subjects. I don't see any for workplace soft skills. So if you're interested in measuring your workplace soft skills, please reach out to us at the end of this webinar because we could help you with that. All right. We have 77% voted. The majority of you guys have learning outcomes for both workplace skills and fundamental subjects. Great. Interesting. Okay, so we right now have 83% of you have answered, and I'm going to give it just a moment more. See if we collect any more responses. 85%. Okay, so I will close this poll and then share. And as you can see, the majority of you do have learning outcomes for your core fundamental subjects, and some of you do, 30%, and then the majority of you are measuring have outcomes for both your core fundamental subjects and workplace soft skills. And there's just a few of you that don't have learning outcomes in place. So, all right, thank you. So I'm going to hide that. All right. So intended student learning outcomes are statements that describe the desired learning students should have acquired and should be able to demonstrate, so it's measurable, at the end of a program of study. They identify what students should know and be able to do as a result of completing a particular degree program. Consequently, statements of intended learning outcomes should be clearly articulate the intended knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies that characterize the essential learning required of a program of study. So they should be objective, comprehensive, and provide measurable results. And you may or may not be aware, but learning outcomes in higher education is a fairly recent practice. About 20 years ago, accreditors began to add this as a requirement, and therefore it has generated more interest among higher education professionals. One of the key tenets of learned outcomes is having rigorous measurement of retained knowledge, ensuring students are learning. Another key area is ensuring continuous improvement. By determining our learning outcomes, we can develop a baseline and objectives related to where our program is and where we want it to be. And then, of course, there is accountability. Today, you may notice there's a lot of skeptics about the value of a degree. And we know that that a degree holds a lot of value, right? Especially today, where we have 21st century skills and we're needing to develop a strong workforce. But we must be accountable to our students, our alumni, our employers, and our accreditors and show them that value. So when we are drafting learning outcomes, there are several key parts included, and that includes an action verb, subject content, level of achievement, and condition of performance, if applicable. These outcomes then are paired with a rubric to help you determine if a student is proficient or has progressed within that particular outcome. Here you will see two formulas that you can use to write intended learning outcomes. As an English instructor, I really like these formulas and I like sharing them with you. So statements of intended student learning outcomes specify both an observable action on the part of a student and the object of that action. In addition, they also may include criteria for acceptable performance and or other modifiers of the action or object of the action. Consequently, in writing intended student learning outcomes, it may be useful to begin each learning outcome statement with students will be able to establish your subject, followed by an appropriate verb relating to the desired action or performance associated with an intended cognitive level, and ending the object of the with the object of the statement, describing the learning that the students are expected to demonstrate through action or performance. In addition, learning outcome statements, as you see in the second example, may also include modifiers that specify standards, conditions, or criteria for acceptable performance, or that further clarify or elaborate on the targeted business or business-related learning. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples here. This is a fairly simple example of a student outcome. So you will see here, students will be able to integrate legal and ethical principles in business into responsible leadership decisions. In this example, we begin with the suggested phrase, students will be able to. And then we use the verb integrate. That verb belongs to the Bloom's level analyzing, right? And that's not the lowest level, that's kind of mid. And then the object is legal and ethical principles of business, and the modifier is into, oh, I am so sorry. That, Laura, are you thinking that you're wondering what I'm reading? I was reading the second example. I'm sorry, I had it here. Okay, so this first example, and I am so sorry, I'll start over. Students will be able to identify the principal concepts and theories of the functional areas of business. In this example, we begin with the suggested phrase, students will be able to. And then the verb is identify. Now that belongs to Bloom's level, remembering, which is the lowest level. And then the object is the principal concepts and theories in the functional areas of business. business, and there's no modifiers in this one. Example 2 is what I just went over, and again, I apologize for that, but you can see that here that this is the Bloom's level analyzing. We use the verb integrate. The object is legal and ethical principles in business, and the modifier, this one does have a modifier, into responsible leadership decisions. And then the next example, students will be able to formulate innovative management strategies using a triple bottom line approach. So in this example, again, we start with students will be able to, the verb is formulate, which belongs to the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy, creating, and the object is innovative management strategies, and the modifier is using a triple bottom line approach. And just as a reminder, you're going to see those lower levels, right, mostly in your learning objectives for undergraduate programs. And then those higher levels, the majority of your learning objectives in graduate programs are going to consist of those higher level verbs. All right, and it is you, Laura.
Okay, thank you, Desiree. So once you've written your learning outcomes, then you are ready to evaluate them. So a couple of the things we're going to go over are the differences between formative and summative assessments. Also, the differences between direct and indirect measurements. We're going to go over different ways that learning outcomes can be measured. We're also going to provide a definition of what those measures and metrics and targets are. And so formative versus summative assessment. So formative assessment is more of a course level assessment. It is an integral part of the learning process. It's used to evaluate and improve learning, but it is at the course level. This helps, for teachers to improve their individual curriculum for their courses and to improve student learning at that course level. Whereas program level assessments are not an evaluation of the course, but an evaluation of the program itself. So program level assessments are generally embedded in like a capstone course right before students graduate. And it evaluates their retained knowledge for the entire program. This is a good example of why final student grades aren't program assessment. So as you can see from student 1 and student 2, a student's overall grade includes things other than actual exams measuring their knowledge. It includes their, how good of a student are they? Did they participate? Do they present well? And so those things are not what we're looking for when we're doing a programmatic assessment. So student learning can be measured using several methods that are grouped into 2 categories, direct and indirect measures. Best practice is to use some of both, direct and indirect measures. So here's some examples of direct measures. Standardized assessments. So Peregrine is a good example of that, our programmatic assessments. You can also use structured and guided internships, graduate employment rates, oral exams, final projects, and so on. Indirect measures include satisfaction surveys, interviews, evaluations, and focus group discussions. So these are more subjective types of measures, and they're more based on, students' feelings about their education, their opinions, things of that nature. So metrics, measures, and targets defined. So the metric is the instrument that you're going to use to evaluate your outcomes. So for example, are you going to use a programmatic assessment? Or are you going to use another tool to provide that measurement for you? The measure is the specific result from that tool that you've used to evaluate your learning outcome. And then the target is the performance that you're wanting to see relative to that measure. So have you improved in a specific area to the level that you had set as your goal?
All right, so we have another poll. So we just want to ask, so most of you answered that you currently have learning objectives already mapped out, and that is great. But we want to ask, do you currently objectively measure your learning outcomes? And so I'm going to launch that poll right now, and if you wouldn't mind participating. All right. You should see the poll now. So you can answer yes, all learning outcomes are objectively measured, somewhat, most of our learning outcomes are objectively measured, or no, we are currently not objectively measuring our learning outcomes. All right, and the majority of you so far are answering most of you.
Oh, great.
Or most are objectively, not all, but most, which is good. And only 4% said no, we are currently not objectively measuring our learning outcomes.
Well, I wish that we had asked one more question of you all, and that is what if you create your own assessments or if you use any external assessments. So that would be interesting to know as well.
Yeah, if you don't mind, go into the question box and answer. Do you create your own assessments to objectively measure those learning outcomes? Or do you currently use an external provider to measure those? Is that what you're asking, Laura?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, if you don't mind getting into the chat, okay, we create our own, someone said, and I'm gonna go ahead and the majority of people have voted here, so I'm gonna close this and share it while you keep answering us in the chat box. We develop our own, create our own.
Everybody develops their own.
We use internal and Peregrine. Well,
thank
we
you.
do both. Yes, thank you. Validated instruments. We use a mix of objective, subjective, some created internally, some validated instruments. Great.
Awesome. Thank you for responding.
Yeah. We use internal and Peregrine. Thank you, Barbara. Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and I'm going to close the poll. You see the results here, 55% most are objectively measured. So you're measuring most of your learning outcomes, but maybe not all of them at this point. And that may be for a variety of reasons. Maybe you don't have the right tool or instrument to do so. Maybe it's because the learning objectives aren't quite measurable because of the verb used to signify the level of learning. But 41% of you said all of them are objectively measured, which is really cool. Okay, so I'm going to, and okay, there we go. So I do want to provide you with a resource. If you're interested in learning more about the assurance of learning process, we do have something free or of no cost to you today. It's a complimentary resource for today's webinar participants only, and Peregrine is offering it to you. You will have a chance to request this course at the end of our presentation. The purpose of this course is to teach the concepts, principles, and requirements associated with assurance of learning to higher education officials seeking initial or reaffirmation of accreditation. So you'll have a chance to ask for that at the end of this webinar, but I wanted to let you know about it now. And then back to Laura.
Okay, so now we're going to talk some about Peregrine's solutions for evaluating your learning outcomes. Okay, so Peregrine offers programmatic assessments for various types of programs, including all of those listed here, from early childhood education to public administration, accounting and finance, criminal justice, business, and also healthcare administration. We also have a soft skill assessment now, which I'll be sharing with you. So some of the key features of Peregrine's programmatic assessments is that they are customizable. So you're going to look at your learning outcomes, you're going to review our exam summaries, and you're going to make a determination as far as which of our topics align with your learning outcomes, and you're going to create your exam accordingly. Our assessments can be integrated into almost any learning management system. And we have graduate and undergraduate test banks, 24/7 unlimited access to your student data, as well as the ability to run reports and basically have them at your fingertips 24 hours a day. We also have fairly extensive aggregate pools for most of the programmatic assessments to benchmark against. We also have security measures in place, which are important right now when so many students are having to do things online and you don't have the ability to proctor them physically in a classroom. Peregrine's assessment was designed to be taken online, and we do have measures in place to protect the integrity of that assessment without the need for a proctor. And finally, the assessment does directly align with accrediting bodies. For business, an example is ACBSP. For healthcare, that would be AUPA and CAMI. So one of our favorite reports is the internal analysis report. This is an amazing tool to evaluate your program. And so this, not only does it give you results at the topic level, but it goes down to the subject level. So you can further evaluate your students' scores in a specific area and identify, trends over time as you're looking at your data over time, areas where students are consistently having a more difficult time. You can target those areas and based on, with this report, you get one external benchmark. But you can set goals where you want to narrow gaps between your school's results and the benchmark that you're using. And then eventually make changes based on what you're seeing in the trends to your program and what you're teaching or how your curriculum is designed. The external comparison report is purely for benchmarking. You can choose up to 5 different external benchmarks. Peregrine does provide information in the reports as far as what client schools comprise each of those aggregate pools. So I know for some of you that's important to know, well, we're benchmarking against this pool, but which schools are in that pool? Like, whose data am I comparing our results against? So we do provide that information in our reports, as well as information on the size of the aggregate pools and how much data is in each of them that you're benchmarking against, and that can make a difference. So that is one thing that Peregrine provides that can be important to schools. The longitudinal report is great for providing those data points that you need for your accrediting body. This is basically a comparison of time periods. You can compare up to 4 time periods. That could be academic years, it could be semesters, or however your terms are for your school. You can enter those in however you'd like to, and you can run this report as many times as you need to in order to cover all the time periods. This report includes a regression analysis and is going to show you the trend over time and where you've had improvement or lack of improvement in a specific area. So students do receive a certificate of completion when they complete their exam. It's a very detailed breakdown of their scores at each of the topic levels as well as the subject levels. And so this is a great tool for students and for faculty to identify, where students, where their strengths were and where their weaknesses were. So if you were using this for incoming students into a master's program and you needed to know where their knowledge was when they were coming in, this is a great tool to evaluate that and determine what additional coursework they might need or leveling modules or things of that nature. This can also be used by students to demonstrate to prospective employers if they would like to, or if they would like to provide it, say, on their LinkedIn profile, because it does provide a percentile ranking. So if they did fairly well on the assessment, they might want to share that, and this would be their proof. So now we'll move on to evaluating soft skills. Soft skills have become more and more important over the last 10 years. They can be difficult to define and hard to measure. There is subjectivity involved. It's difficult when you're evaluating yourself or when you're evaluating your peers or being evaluated by your peers. So there is some subject to bias as well. So what Peregrine has created is called a value skills workplace assessment. It uses a 360-degree evaluation process to measure proficiency levels in different workplace competencies. So you create your own assessment, and it does, you know, the students are evaluated by their peers, supervisors, advisors, or mentors, or their colleagues on the skills that you've chosen for your assessment. So as I was saying, the instrument is customizable. There's 200 plus skills to choose from that you wish to evaluate, and corresponding rubrics. You also have the ability to write your own skills that you want to evaluate. So the rubrics do increase the objectivity of the assessment. They are 5-point Likert scales, but they focus on behavior, not so much the person that's being evaluated, but their behavior. So the great thing about the assessment as well is that there's the ability to track results over time and have a pre and post test construct. So for example, you could have students be evaluated at the beginning of their program and they would receive an action plan that they could then work on throughout the duration of their program, and then evaluate them again at the end of the program to see how they'd grown and changed in the different skill levels. So Peregrine is very proud of its reports for its assessments. Value skills is no different, and we've created some really nice reports for the participants. We also have group reports if you're wanting to run a report on an entire cohort of students who have been evaluated. And the participants do get an action plan that gives them some suggested activities and suggested ways that they can improve their skills in the specific areas where they were weaker.
Yes, thank you, Laura. When I came to Peregrine, I was completely blown away by value skills. I had worked in higher education, primarily with workforce training, and this had seemed to be a common issue that just came up over and over again. So to have an assessment that allows us to objectively measure those skills that are so important to success in life is huge. So I just want to stop for a moment and tell you about next week. So if you are a healthcare administration program, which I'm sure I have some of you on the line here, if so, say hi. And we are having another webinar next week. So we've gone very briefly through our knowledge-based assessment that is used for programmatic, evaluation to help you with your quality assurance processes. And also if you're seeking to get credentialed by AUPHA or currently you currently are credentialed by AUPHA or maybe CAMI, this is something that can definitely help you. So next week, November 17th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, you can register where you registered for this webinar at www.peregrineglobal.com/webinars. We are going to talk about assessment as a solution. So it's really going to be focused on our knowledge-based assessment and how to utilize our knowledge-based assessment to demonstrate the quality of education. So if this is something that you are interested in just kind of learning more about, maybe it's going to increase efficiency within your program. Maybe it's going to provide a cost savings. Maybe it's going to provide you with the type of data you need to achieve your accreditation dreams or your credential dreams or certification. I'm saying the wrong word, certification dreams. join us, and we are going to go over it. It's going to be a great time, and you will gain a lot of information about our assessment. But of course, if you are not available next week and you want to learn more about the healthcare administration assessment, at the end of this webinar, we're going to share our contact information, and you can reach out to us directly, and we would be happy to set up a one-on-one meeting with you. And so that leads me to the next poll question. What do you need from us? And so I'm going to run this right now. But, oops, wrong one. I apologize. What do you need from us? Launch. So would you like access to the Assurance of Learning module? Would you like to have a call or a virtual meeting to discuss maybe some assessment issues that you're having? Maybe we can just provide some guidance. We do have a wealth of expertise and knowledge here at Peregrine. An email with more information about solutions, or a notification of upcoming webinars. So go ahead and just answer the poll question. Let us know what you need from us, and we are going to gladly provide it. And I see that a lot of you want access to the Assurance of Learning course, and I'm glad to hear that. And really, the Assurance of Learning course is kind of this general course, because believe it or not, accreditors, regardless of the program type, business, criminal justice, early childhood education, healthcare administration, the process has a lot of commonalities. And so this is relevant to all of you here. Great, 68%. Okay. All right. Okay, just give you a moment more. Oh, yes. Okay, we've got a lot of you have voted. You want something, you know, there is a next step. So I'm grateful. I'm glad that we can support you. 70% has voted now. Okay, maybe I should just wait a moment more, because I don't want to miss any of you if there's something you need from us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll, but thank you for responding to that. Oh, 72%. I'm going to close out this poll now. Thank you for responding, and we are going to reach out to you. Some of you will hear from us today, and some of us, it might just be a couple days as we go through and ensure that everything you requested is provided to you with that email. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this. All right, so 68% want the Assurance of Learning course, 9% would like an email about more information, and 24% want notification of upcoming webinars. Thank you all for voting. Okay, and we will definitely provide that to you. And so now I think we have some time for questions. Now, Cassie, I know you're going to get on and look at the questions for us, so thank you. I did see somebody ask about the materials. Just so you know, right here in your GoToWebinar panel, we do have the presentation PDF uploaded. I believe I uploaded it right before the presentation, so you should be able to download it from there. But when we respond with our email, we'll also include a link to the recording of this webinar for your reference. And Cassie, are there any other questions? That was the only one I saw.
No, Desiree, I think you answered them all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're
I just
good.
had seen it, so, you know.
Hey, it works.
Okay. Well, again, join us next week for our webinar on how our knowledge-based healthcare administration assessment works. I'm going to share our contact information here. There is more at peregrineglobal.com. That is me, Desiree Moore. And then my partner in crime, who's presented with me today, is Laura Miller, and so you can reach her there. You can call us, of course. We're always open to take phone calls. And then we have our general information line. And so if you need a moment, we're just going to sit here so you can record this information. And we really do hope to hear from you. So, and you'll hear from us. All right. Okay. Well, there doesn't seem to be any other questions, right? So I think that we will end this broadcast, but I want to thank you again for being our thought partner, being here with us today. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.